Hello everybody, good afternoon. This is the last keynote of the day, so thank you very much, Paolo, for accepting to have some insights on what you did for several years. Now your book is at, you're working on the second edition of your book. I'm also glad that you are for the second time in our conference. Paolo was keynote also in our first conference in Bucharest. Without any other introduction, I just thank you very much for coming here, and I enjoy listening to what you did. Thank you.
Good afternoon, it is an honor to be here. I've been presenting people copies with the first edition of this book. That was done on a first come, first served basis. So I hope that's ethical or equitable or whatever. I see there is here Liz Barlow of Palgrave asked us to go over and make a second edition. And following Mark Twain, the second edition is shorter than the first edition. So it's about 2/3, and I hope that's the arguments, the logic flows smoother. Let me try to say anyway what is in the book. First of all, what are these values and who are these stakeholders we talk about just already in the title, and why we felt the need to add the unknown adjective in the title of the second edition. Implementation, I already mentioned that. Implementation is about summary statements vis-a-vis plans. We see a lot of plans around, but very few measures and summary statements of what has been done. A second value is self-ethics, which is, I know it's a repetition because ethics is about self, or should be about self. I do this because big ethics is about big questions, and most of the time, big ethics is about the ethics of the others. We oftentimes think of ethics as whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is about the others. And self-ethics is a repetition, meaning let us look at ourselves. A third, very controversial, is competition. Competition as a driver of accountability. I know this is going to be controversial, but please bear with us for a second, and then we will come back to this. So albeit these words are not so abstruse, while others are, before we go into an explanation of what we mean with such values and who are the stakeholders that hold such values, because these are very different from the canon of values we hear a lot about. Integrity, professionalism, loyalty to the institution, honesty. God forbid we are dishonest. Those are the Weberian values, depicting the priestlyhood of organization, man or woman, for that matter. So, if we change the values, if we change the bearings of we change the stakeholders, Let's make one step back anyway, and ask how these values materialize in our minds. Why was this search necessary? What was the need for such search of unknown values? Well, we were struck by the unnecessary character of mainstream CSR. It all came about in a sort of experimental process. This happened reading a lot of CSR reports by corporations reading government reports, which are not CSR reports, but are reports anyway, and observing the reality of all organizations through a magnifying lens of CSR, of opportunities to see the social impact and the responsibility of organizations towards society. Doing this, we were struck by the unsatisfactory nature of mainstream CSR. Small roots in the economic and sociological literature, bad apple approach to ethics, as Davide Torsello told us yesterday. CSR is shunned in corporate circles. When you speak to the corporate stallions, financial, commercial, CSR. Not so good. Focus on big corporations. Listed corporations are the focus of corporate social responsibility. A lot of philanthropy, as Denise Baden told us yesterday. A lot of welfare capitalism, which is a nice thing, but it was already there. Shared value, the big imagination of shared value. It appears a stretching of otherwise very powerful instruments, such as the value chain and the diamond, Michael Porter's diamond. Reading, going through the messages of CEOs, presidents that canvass the CSR reports of corporations, we read a lot of self-indulgent, non-authentic language. We are a family. How many times we read, we are a family? The business firm is seen as a profit-maximizing black box oftentimes, and there is an overlap with environmentalism, which is a nice thing to have, but it was already there since the 70s, since the limits of growth, since Barry Commoner, and so it appears an overlap, it appears an unnecessary thing to have addendum to environmentalism. So notwithstanding these shortcomings, however, we felt there was indeed a lot of things to be said and done about the business firm that was not done in the financial operations and in the core operations of the firm, and was not said in the financial reports. So we looked for something that was more cogent than the mainstream CSR ideas of special programs. So we looked inside the firm, and leveraging studies on organizational behavior, we found that living in the margin is not an exception, rather it is the rule. Muddling through the concept, Lindblom, 1958, it was developed through corporate analysis. And we have to remember ourselves that it is us muddling through, it is us who are dirty with mud, not the others. That's an element of self-ethics. Other concepts came to mind: the standard operating procedures, satisficing, Herbert Simon, and others, transaction costs, principal-agent conflict, budget maximizing, ex-efficiency, non-objectivity of accounting, as Elio Borgonovi reminded us Wednesday night, I guess. So what all these threads of thought have in common is they overcome the 19th century view of Weberian rationalism, and following these analytical frameworks, there is a lot of material for the business firm to disclose what is without need for special, what the business firm is and how it behaves, without special need for special programs, for ad hoc CSR programs. So disclosure, again, is indeed a value that is not mentioned in the canon of values, but is one of the values that we propose, and it is already around when people speak of materiality and of other synonyms. Also, disclosure is is mentioned. So this is the unknown part. We don't use the word unknown in terms of new. Unknown is like in the unknown warrior, someone who had a name once, who was killed, doesn't have anybody stewarding that person. So unknown is ignored in the sense of ignored or forgotten. Not, we don't have any aspiration to say new things, just reorganizing, just bringing back into the focus all things that are already there. So CSR appears to be something that the business firm is. It is not something that the business firm does. CSR is about the inner workings of the business firm according to the insights, the criticism of organizational behavior, revealing how these insights show the organization is not the rational pyramid, is not that rosy garden of earthly delights. We also looked outside the firm. We found the differences among firms are key with regard to competition. One big differentiator of one firm to the other is competition. And competitors were not listed in the classical list of stakeholders, albeit they were in many of the papers that we saw in this conference. Athanasios Kimis, my colleague, showed us yesterday the curvilinear relationship he found between competition in the industrial sectors and corporate social performance. I guess yesterday he showed that relationship among countries, but he also has that among industries of the same country. Competition, again, is also value to analyze all organizations, because when we not only have competition among firms, but most importantly, we have the lack of competition between firms and public administration organizations. So we need to think of competition when it is there and when it is not there. Keeping to look outside, besides looking outside the firm, we looked outside our own country, and we found the watershed between the competitive and the non-competitive sectors is far from homogeneous as we go through different countries. We had some of that discussion yesterday, and that points to the comparatistic nature of the things we had to say. That is, look at the differences between industries and sectors within one country, looking at differences within countries. There is many ways to do the same thing across countries. Things that have the same name are different across countries. Okay? So one further question is, so the nice question that comes out here is, do we want to know something about the social impact and therefore the social responsibility of the sector or sectors, whatever, that are not subject to competition? Huh? CSR has been working so well for the business firm. What is the impediment to extend such a concept to all organizations, including public administration? Why not? Why not? Within one country, if we try to weigh the different sectors within one country, comparing the competitive and the non-competitive arenas, we found larger corporations are a small fraction of the cycle that builds gross national product. 10% at most. Government, on the other hand, when it turns over 50% of GDP, makes at least one crucial third of the GDP cycle. I speak of the GDP cycle because government's share of GDP is not a contribution to GDP. We need to go to the other equivalents of GDP. We don't need to go to production equivalents of GDP. We need to go to expenditure equivalents of GDP to find government expenditure. That 50% is consumption of GDP. GDP is made by production, the productive sector, things that are sold. Then you get taxes, you pay taxes, taxes finance government, the government spends the money that it raises through taxes. So GDP is a cycle, and there is competition or non-competition across the whole cycle. And we have to understand the relevance of the different organizational arrangements in the different phases of the GDP cycle. We worked in cases in capsule form in the book. We obtained a process framework to reveal the social responsibility of organizations. So these values make up a process framework. A process framework, as opposed to an issue framework, is a process framework is a way of saying things. It doesn't tell you what to say. Disclosure. What do I have to disclose? Think about it. Look inside the firm. Look at, and disclose what's relevant, what's material. Implementation. What do I have to say? Give us specific measures of the things you say. You say you steward your consumers. You say you ran customer satisfaction. Please give us numbers, okay? Competition. Please give us an assessment of the competitive environment in which your profits are made. Open and free competition, says the Bible, the Isaiah of corporate social responsibility. Make profits under open and free competition. How open and free is the competition in your sector? Please tell us that. So working in our case, we obtained the process framework. An issue framework is tell us this and this and GRI. GRI is an issue framework. GRI, sort of graveyard of social responsibility, but still, it would be nice. GRI would be great if corporations and other organizations wrote their CSR reports according to the GRI standard, so that we could compare, just like we compare financial statements. On the other hand, the corporations make their own reports in a pseudo-creative way, and then in the end, thank God, they have a correspondence table to the GRI standards. That makes comparison extremely complicated, extremely burdensome. So, to make a long story short, implementation, as we say, is one value. The competitive conditions bring us to the unknown stakeholders. There are those who don't even know they have a stake, because economic weights in the economy run very subterraneans, and like Jack Kerouac, and you find that people who are subject to competition may bear the burden of work of people not subject to competition. So it's important to report about non-vocal and distant publics, the forgotten groups, says Mansour also. Everybody is responsible then within the organization. We get this view, everybody is responsible within the organization, because everybody within the organization can be compared to someone weaker than them outside responsibilities. That's not inside our firm's responsibility. So that's an interesting point of view, because many times we keep in this Marxian father-child relationship of management-employee. We have to, everybody is empowered. Even the lowest person within an organization is responsible, because he or she has the opportunity to leave, or the duty to leave that organization. Otherwise, they can stay, but they have to be responsible, because they are taking part. The logic, but my CEO is making 135 times what I am making. You're still making 3 times what you would make outside in another sector, subject to competition. This is all good news for the CSR, because it creates a world of action and transparency that is not there, that could be there, that we would like to see there. Looking outside our own country then, we realize that capitalism in such a cross-national perspective is no longer the night where all cows are black. We need to speak of capitalism. Just like, because the watersheds between the sectors and the way things are done are different across countries. So we don't think of capitalism as a blueprint. We hardly see capitalism realized. So this is reformulated CSR to tell sort of a new story, to give us values we need to follow and the way we need to report about an organization abiding the rule under open and free competition. The free market is not the freedom of a few to cheat on the majority or to cheat on others, rather it is the market of the free. If anyone is not free, then it's not free market. So that's an important, I think that's a nice thing. We want to reveal the asymmetries within society and the working conditions of individuals. We are identifying a new inequality, man-made, an inequality that separates about 20% of the working humanity, that is 500 million, from the remaining 3 billion. 20%, I guess that's 1/6, 1/5. 500 million out of 3.5 billion, it's 1/5, 20%. So this inequality is, are you working within an organization that is subject to competition, or are you not working within an organization that is subject to competition? We find this inequality appears to account for many more consequences of the state of the world than the 1%, 99% difference, that kind of inequality which is mainstream again today, Atkinson, Piketty, and so forth. This is a new perspective. This is also a new perspective on economic development. We distinguish the norm from a factual reality. We develop skepticism towards non-observed rules. Taxes. We spoke yesterday about observing, paying taxes, evading taxes, but we also have to ask ourselves, are taxes correct? Taxes may be legitimate because they have been democratically voted, but legitimacy of the norm does not ensure effectiveness of the norm. We may all agree that tonight we are going to be drinking champagne. We may unanimously decide that tonight we drink champagne. That doesn't imply we have the money to afford champagne. That does not imply that champagne is going to be good for our livers. Okay? So, but we unanimously decide that. So legitimacy of the norm does not ensure effectiveness and of the norm itself. We obtain this way, looking at the differences in the working conditions of people, we obtain a duty of accountability from all the sectors, from all organizations. So we obtain the liberal paradigm through non-ideological hypotheses. We obtain the liberal paradigm on the basis of the equality principle, equality of people vis-à-vis their working conditions, subject or not subject to competition. I think that's a nice thing. I hope that's a nice thing to have. And social responsibility movement then can count on wider basis for their action and research. Social accountability becomes the duty to be equal. The duty not to be more or abuse someone else. The equality is not only the right to be equal, but it is also the duty to be equal. The symmetry between all organization and the individual is set on a lot of scholarship, and investigations can be run through all sectors of the economy. I stop here, and I hope you have questions for me. Thank you.